Dave wanted to get goofy for these YouTube intros, so he is wearing a hood. Welcome
blue
to
hoodie, blue Lynn University hoodie. Yes.
Well, that is not so relevant for today. What is relevant is that we're talking about tight ends, and we welcome you to the show, YouTube. We want you to hit like, we want you to hit subscribe, and we want you to check out all of our YouTube exclusive content, live mock drafts on Tuesday nights to get you ready, and then 3 live shows throughout the season, every single week throughout the season, just on YouTube. Tell your friends, and here we go. It is the year of the tight end. I don't know if we're going to... No, I feel like we're done saying that, right? We've fallen for that too many times. It is never the year of the tight end. It is 2022, and Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are first or second round picks. Then you got a big 3 after that. It's a fun year for I love tight end. I absolutely love it. If you don't require a tight end in your league, I think that is such a cop-out. Oh, my God. It kills so much draft day strategy. This is really a fun position on draft day, I think, even though it's kind of a lousy position at the end of the year. And good morning to everybody. Adam, Dave, Jamie, Heath here to talk about the tight end position. Guys, how are you feeling about tight end? Heath, how are you feeling? You feeling my tight end enthusiasm?
I think tight end is awesome. It's obviously this is the year it's going to be deep. And we have a lot of great late options.
Yeah, a lot of sarcasm there. I don't want it to be deep. I want the draft day conundrum, Dave, of do I go early? Do I go round 4? There's a lot to think about, a lot to sweat.
Sure. Yes. When do you grab a tight end? That is a question that has crossed our minds many times. And I think one big key is knowing before you draft what the ADP is. You should know before you draft. Where's Kelce going? Oh, he's still the top 15 pick. Where's Mark Andrews going? He's going late round 2. Maybe you'll be lucky if you get him in round 3. Where's Pitts? Where's Waller? Where's Kittle? And then after those 5, if you like Dalton Schultz, I kind of like Dalton Schultz, you should know where he's going. And after that, you just you almost want to fade the position. You definitely don't want to reach for a tight end unless it's a tight end premium league.
Jamie, which tight end has been on most of your team more than anyone else? Which tight end do you find yourself drafting the most in the mocks and the real drafts you've done?
The one that I've probably drafted the most is Zach Ertz. The one that I tend to look for the most is probably Schultz. The one who I don't mind settling for the most is Cole Kmet.
When do we draft Kelce?
Round 1.
But where?
Somewhere between... I think you're okay taking him anywhere between 10 and 15.
Yeah.
Heath? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no,
he's going 15th.
Nothing to add there.
Okay, great. He's going 15th in Fantasy Pros PPR average draft position. We're going to talk about the Hall of Fame game in just a little bit. I listened back to yesterday's podcast and the quarterbacks preview, and I thought, we probably should have talked about some of the quarterbacks earlier in the show instead of just doing strategy, and then get into the QBs. So we're going to do it a little bit differently today. I'm going to try a segment, never done this before, 15 tight ends in 5 minutes. And I don't know if we'll get to 15 tight ends, but we're going to try. So I'm going to say the name of a tight end, and you guys give me just a succinct sentence or two on how you feel about that tight end, just for the, because, for example, I listened to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast as an extremely casual listener, and I listened to the position previews, and I really didn't know a lot of the guys they were talking about, or if I knew them, I barely knew much about them. So there are a lot of listeners who are in that boat. They don't know what to expect from Mike Gesicki or Herb Smith or something like that. So let's give you just a quick sound bite on these guys to get you.
Can I give some math first? 15 tight ends in 5 minutes means 20 seconds per tight end.
Yeah.
20 seconds. And you're going to say their name. So now we're at 15 seconds.
No, it takes me 5 seconds to say a name.
Can I give you some advice, Adam?
Yeah.
I asked Dave and Heath to give me running back battles yesterday in 15 seconds. And 5 minutes later, we were done on 14.
No, I know these segments always run long, but let's give it a shot anyway. Here we go. 5 minutes are on the clock. Travis Kelce, Dave.
Best tight end in the game, worth a top 15 pick.
Boom.
Mark Andrews, Heath.
Right behind Travis Kelce and maybe right ahead of him.
Is anyone taking Mark Andrews other than Heath? Anyone taking him as a top 20 pick?
No.
No.
Okay, so
but we should talk about things changing in Baltimore that help Mark Andrews.
Oh, we will. Kyle Pitts, Jamie.
Potential to be the number 1 tight end in fantasy. Looking great in camp. Should be a 3rd round pick.
I know, Heath, you don't agree with that real quick.
I do not.
He should be a what pick? 4th round?
But I've got him in round 5.
Oh, Kyle Pitts. Okay.
I'm
He's
not drafting Kyle Pitts again.
Dave, George Kittle.
Kittle's been a top 4 fantasy tight end each of the past 4 seasons on a per game basis in PPR. That might be in a little bit of jeopardy with Trey Lance under center, but he's still someone that you should feel good taking in round 5.
Heath, Darren Waller.
We'll see how much Devontae Adams hurts him, but he's right there in round 5 with Kittle and Pitts for me.
We want to agree with that? Well, with Kittle at least?
He's ahead of Kittle for me. I think he's got a shot at getting plenty of touchdowns.
Yep.
He's my number 3 tight end.
Okay. So does everybody have Kittle 5th?
I do.
Yep.
Dalton Schultz, a round 6 pick in ADP. Jamie.
Me?
Dalton Schultz, yeah.
You're the Jamie.
That sounded like you said Dave. But then again, I don't know exactly what you're saying, depending on the language you're using. Dalton Schultz could be top 5, could be top 3. Clear path to targets with the injuries and the loss of Amari Cooper. Instead, Wilson should build off last year's performance.
Dave, TJ Hawkinson.
Not going to be quite as good of a target share guy as he was last year early on with the Lions. A reluctant top 10 tight end to draft.
I do like that they've talked about his working with him on his yards after the catch. He fell down a lot last year, apparently.
Oh, really?
Clumsy.
Quick note on Hawkinson. He actually ran pretty deep routes, but his ADOT was very low. He had the 8th longest route depth among tight ends, but Goff just did not throw downfield. Dallas Goedert, Heath.
Should be number 6. Sneaky breakout candidate. Might be tight end 3.
In the final 9 games last year after the Ertz trade, he averaged 12.6 PPR points per game. And think about what the Eagles' offense was like for most of those games.
And that was with only 2 touchdowns.
Both from Gardner Minshew. Zach Ertz, Jamie.
That's true.
Should benefit the first 6 games without DeAndre Hopkins there. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with everyone once Hopkins returns in week 7, but did very well with the Cardinals and should be a good late round bargain.
Dawson Knox, Adam. That's the only guy who likes Dawson Knox. I still think he is too early as a round 8 pick. If you're the last person in your league to take a tight end, Dawson Knox is a fine player with an opportunity for more targets, and he actually led all tight ends in goal-to-go routes run last year, so he is involved near the end zone. Pat Freiermuth, Heath.
I wonder if there's a connection between him leading the NFL in goal-to-go routes run and Josh Allen being terrible in the red zone last year. What was the name you said?
You know what? I'm skipping you. I don't like that. I don't like that sauce. Pat Freiermuth.
Not basically expensive Dawson Knox, not going to score as many touchdowns as he did last year. A little worried that he's a bust.
Actually going 1 pick behind, or 1 ADP pick behind.
Right. I'm sorry. In our drafts.
In our drafts. But he is going behind Dawson Knox. A few more here. Mike Gesicki, Dave.
Going to be a waste of a fantasy draft pick because he will be no better than 3rd on the Dolphins in targets and is an overrated fantasy prospect.
Also expected to block more this year. Cole Kmet, that is from him and the coaches, basically. Cole Kmet, Jamie.
My second favorite breakout tight end behind everybody's favorite, Kyle Pitts. Should be second on the team in targets, should find the end zone, and has a great opportunity to be one of the best options for Justin Fields, second best option for Justin Fields, and tremendous value on drafting.
That is 13 tight ends. Everybody give me one more tight end that we have not talked about, that if all 13 of these guys have been picked, the next one off the board should be who, Dave?
I will say David Njoku, who has the chance to be second on the Browns in targets, even without Deshaun Watson there. Nice short area guy for Jacoby Brissett to lean on. Clearly a good athlete, someone the Browns have no choice but to use, especially after they paid him as a threat in the passing game. And a good early schedule to begin the year.
Heath. So Njoku for Dave. Heath.
Tyler Higbee. I don't know why everybody else hates him, but he's going to be a borderline top 12 tight end like he usually is, and he's shown us a 4 or 5 game stretch of elite production in the past. Maybe Sean McVay will decide to do that.
Van Jefferson's injury does open the door for Higbee to be interesting at the beginning of the year. And Buffalo's secondary is beat up right now. That's who they play in week 1. That just hit me.
I think both of those things could be different by week 1, though. I mean, Jefferson could be back, and all 3 of the guys who are beat up, right?
They could be playing. It's true. It's possible. But if Van Jefferson's back after coming off of surgery, I can't imagine he's going to have a huge
Tyler
role.
Higbee's getting more targets than Van Jefferson anyway.
I don't understand why Higbee is tight end 22. I do not get it. It's really weird. Jamie, if those 13 tight ends are gone, who should be next?
I still, even with the thumb injury, take Irv Smith. I think there's offense is going to be fantastic. And what we were expecting from him last year, I think, will be amplified because of a better offense.
Can I give one more? Do we have enough time?
Yeah, I think we still have time.
Because this is the guy I was debating with Njoku, is Gerald Everett. In Justin Herbert's 32 career games, a tight end has hit 10 points in PPR 17 times, a 53% hit rate. If you think that sucks, the average success rate for a top 12 tight end was 49% last year. That's not so bad. Favorable schedule to begin the year. We'll never see double coverage. I think Everett is another good streaming tight end.
I'm with you. I just wonder with these reports of Donald Parham really stepping up in camp.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
How much that matter?
I think it's interesting, and I'll tell you, Donald Parham was used a lot near the end zone. Jared Cook ran 323 more routes than Parham last season, and in goal-to-go situations, Parham was within 6 of him. So like they basically, and they used Steven Anderson near the goal line too. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm not really feeling it with Gerald Everett. He's never been a good fantasy option.
The best we can say,
Russell Wilson and Hunter Henry and Jared Cook were not good fantasy options, really, the last 2 years with the Chargers.
It's strictly for streaming purposes. This isn't to say he's going to make your team amazing. He did average almost 9 PPR points per game the last half of last year in Seattle, which is something. It's okay. He should have had more. He had a bunch of drops near the end zone too. It's just an opportunity. Yeah. If it's not him and it's Parham, then just take what I said, scratch out Everett's name, put in Donald Parham's name.
Chris Godwin is practicing today. That's big news. There's more news to talk about, including the Broncos running back splits, Matthew Stafford update. We're going to talk about that on the mailbag, which I'm going to record at noon Eastern on Friday. It's going to publish for the listeners on Saturday morning. I'm going to do that with Dan Schneier. Going to read your emails. Going to do some fantasy cops. Going to do Apple Podcast questions. So stay tuned for that. You've heard Dave talk about players being second or third on their team in targets at the tight end position. That is huge. We're going to tell you why in a little bit. We have to talk a bit about the Hall of Fame game and Josh Jacobs. But I also want to tell you about CBS Sports Fantasy Football Commissioner. We play all of our not all of our leagues. We play on all the websites. We play most of our leagues on CBS. And maybe it's because we're used to it. Maybe it's because we're biased. But I will tell you straight up, I find it so much better and so much easier to use and so much more tools at your fingertips. The articles, obviously, but the projections, you can sort the stats in different ways, last 4 games, all these useful things that you can use on CBS Sports. So you can customize your rules. It's great for Dynasty. We've got nearly a 5-star rating in the App Store for the fantasy app. And the advice that you're going to get is great on the app as well, obviously, from Dave, from Jamie, from Heath, Chris Towers, and others. So please sign up for Fantasy Football Commissioner. Go to cbssports.com/fantasyfootball to get a special offer when you start your league today. Seriously, if you can't stand the league, if you can't stand the website that your league is on, step up to the pros. cbssports.com/fantasyfootball and get a special offer when you start today. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame game. Dave, what's the big takeaway from the Raiders-Jaguars? Raiders 27, Jaguars 11.
We're so used to not seeing starters play in the Hall of Fame game. And sure enough, when the Raiders took the field, there's Josh Jacobs as the lead running back for the Raiders. And at first I was like laughing at it, like, oh my God, I can't believe they're putting him in. But he looked good. And I don't know if he necessarily ran against a bunch of first stringers on Jacksonville. Jacksonville did have a bunch of starters playing, but I don't know if all of them were out there. He caught the ball well. He looked good. He acquitted himself well, given the situation that he was in. And I think he played into the second quarter. I know he played for a lot of the first quarter. He looked like a former first-round pick running back should look. But I was also encouraged by how the Raiders used their running backs in this game. Lots of dink and dunk throws to them. It wasn't just Jacobs catching the ball. Kenyon Drake had catches. Amir Abdullah had a catch. Zamir White played. He looked great too. He had some catches. And so I wonder if we're underselling the Raiders running backs catching passes in the offense. And I don't know if we're overselling Josh Jacobs as a total bust. I think there is concern about Jacobs not being like a workhorse. I think that's going to be true, but the coaches kind of challenged him. Josh McDaniels said as much after the game. They wanted to use the opportunity to get their running back some play in a real full contact situation. And Jacobs, I thought, acquitted himself well. I'm not moving him up my rankings. I don't know if I'm moving him down, though, either. I think he's someone that you can draft and think, all right, fair value at his ADP, which is right around end of round 5, beginning of round 6.
My favorite thing that I saw last night was, and Adam and Heath, you'll appreciate this. Heath, mostly because you thought everybody died in the movie. But the "if he dies, he dies" line from Drago about Josh McDaniels not caring about any of his running backs. Yeah, it's this meaningless game. Go out there, play. Who cares? We didn't pick up your 5th-year option. We don't need you anymore. Just go out there. Yeah, whatever happens. I mean, it was a stupid decision. Like, why? You want to give him a series? Fine. The fact that they played him 2 series just makes no sense. They have no concern or care about whatever happens to their backfield. I think it's just a matter of, to your point, Dave, they want to see what they have, but who cares?
It was surprising. Yeah, 5 carries and 2 catches for Jacobs.
So Brandon Bolden was the only running back who didn't play, right?
Oh, he's the guy.
My takeaway from watching all that was I don't know if Kenyon Drake's going to be on this team or playing football anymore.
Zamir White's the second guy.
Yeah, and Drake. I don't think Drake did catch a pass. In fact, I think he came off the field on 3rd downs for Amir Abdullah.
He left for part of the game. It looked like he hurt himself. And then he came back in. I don't know if he may not have caught a pass, but I know that he played. Could they get by with Jacobs as the first guy up, Zamir White as his backup, and Amir Abdullah as the passing downs back?
Well, Brandon
if they can do that, then they can get rid of Drake, assuming that he's not going to kill their cap.
It saves him $250,000, so it's basically they can pay him $3 million to play or play him $3 million to be on somebody else's team.
Yeah, if that's going to be the case, they might keep him.
Okay, let's talk tight end here.
Unless they can trade him.
So here are some key stats at the tight end position. First of all, Travis Kelce was tight end 2 last year after 5 straight seasons as tight end 1. Mark Andrews scored 90 more fantasy points than tight end 3 in PPR. 90 more. And that was Dalton Schultz was tight end 3. In 2020, Travis Kelce scored 136 more points than tight end 3. So it's not always that way. In the previous 4 seasons, Kelce outscored tight end 3 by 34, 40, 31, and 16 points. But the last 2 years, there's been a huge gap between tight end 1 and tight end 3. Once again, so this is the biggest thing, I think, for me anyway. Dave references it a lot. If you're going to be a top 5 tight end, you have to be first or second on your team in targets. And the other thing is, there aren't usually more than 5 or 6 good tight ends, right? So finishing tight end 8 is usually not that impactful of a season. I'm not saying it's useless. Somebody's got to start these guys, right? It helps, extra points. But there aren't usually more than 5 or 6 good tight ends in a year. And if anyone disagrees with that, please feel free.
That's true. The first or second thing is mostly, right? And because you could just score a bunch of touchdowns and be a top 5 tight end and not be first or second on your team in targets. Like Gronk.
But it never happens except one guy in the last 6 years.
Well,
that was Robert Tonyan, who scored a bunch of touchdowns.
Are we talking per game or where they finish?
Full season.
So Dalton Schultz was 3rd last year.
And he was second. He was tied for second on the team in targets with Amari Cooper. With CeeDee Lamb.
Zach Ertz was as well because he was 5th.
So Zach Ertz was number 1. He's an unusual situation because he got traded, but he led the Cardinals in targets from week 7 on. His first game with Arizona, he led the Cardinals in targets. So he was an unusual situation, but I consider him part of this group. The only tight end in the last 6 years to finish top 5, and Heath is right to point it out. That's not per game. That's full season. And not be 1 or 2 on his team in targets was Robert Tonyan 2 years ago, one of the luckiest tight end seasons you'll ever see. And he was 3rd on his team in targets, and he was only 3 targets behind number 2. So I think it's a very important stat. Dave, I think you agree.
Yes. It's one of many stats with tight ends that I think people should know about, but that's the first thing you think about when you're considering drafting a tight end. Can this guy lead his team in targets? And if not, can he be second on the team in targets? And if you look at a guy and you don't think he can do it, then you probably shouldn't draft him.
And we would have answered unequivocally no to that last year with Dalton Schultz. The only reason he was is because Amari Cooper missed a couple of games.
How close were they? That's a good question.
They were tied.
They were tied, but Cooper played 2.5 fewer games.
Mm-hmm.
He's finding the loophole.
No, it's fair. It's fair. I mean, look, I can't always, and I can tell you about tight ends and the quality of the offense and how much that matters, but I can't predict how good an offense is going to be. That's harder than it seems before the season starts.
Right.
So that's fair. But I think, and the other half of this is that over the last 4 seasons, 50% of the tight ends who have finished top 5 in PPR were drafted in round 12 or later. So that's why we say great or late, because half of the top 5 tight ends over the last 5 years, including Dalton Schultz last season, were drafted in round 12 or later. And so, Jamie, when I combine those two stats, I think it's what you're going to say about Cole Kmet. He may not be drafted in round 12 or later, but it's the same concept, right? It's a guy, he's going to be second on the team in targets most likely. And those are the types of players that can have a surprise top 5 season. So that's what I look for when I draft a tight end late.
Yeah, I think, and look, it's a position that you can sort of put guys into certain boxes, right? Because unless things dramatically change for Kmet, I don't think he's going to be in that 8+ touchdown range, especially coming off the year that he just had.
Right.
But he's going to have to make up for it with a significant amount of catches and yards, and he could do that in the role that he's playing in the offense that he's in. Guys like Pat Freiermuth and Dawson Knox, and to a lesser extent, Hunter Henry tied those guys for touchdowns last year. Henry and Robert Tonyan, if he's healthy. If you're just looking for touchdowns late, those are the type of guys that could give you some big weeks, because they could be multiple touchdown guys, but they're going to leave you a lot of empty weeks too, because if they don't score, you're not going to get a lot. And you can put Herb Smith in that category. I think he's probably closer to that than he is a big catch guy. I think you put maybe Kyle Rudolph or Cameron Brate, who ends up being the tight end in Tampa Bay, in that category. And then there's the guys that just kind of, okay, I don't really know what to make of them, because they could be significant in their offenses, but they're not going to be, in the top 2 in targets. Guys like Gerald Everett, who could maybe be a touchdown guy, or could he, just kind of be a do-it-all type of threat. David Njoku, can he, survive with, Jacoby Brissett? Tyler Higbee, where is he going to settle? So there are certainly lots of ways to go about this. I think it's just a matter of, once you get past, to me, there's 10. Once you get past Kmet, it's just, okay, what's the best thing to help me on a week-to-week basis if I'm not playing the roulette game of just, shuffling from one guy to the next.
And so what's the answer there, James? I'm sorry, but what do you look at after your top 10 and 10 being Kmet? Do you look at targets? Do you look at quality of offense? Do you look at, end zone role, that kind of thing? My
11th and 12th tight ends are Pat Freiermuth and Dawson Knox. So I'm leaning towards the touchdown guys, I guess, would be my answer, because I think, again, you're looking at what they did last season. For me, I agree with Heath to a certain extent. Like, I think if Pat Freiermuth is being drafted as a top 10 guy, I would call him a bust. If you're putting him in that group of, and this is, one spot, but 11 through 15, then I think that's kind of the range he should live. But obviously, it's the overall ranking as well matters. Dawson Knox, we've talked a lot about this, and I know, Adam, you did a great job last year in pointing this out before his breakout stretch there of, why don't I attach myself to a great quarterback if I'm looking for a tight end? And he certainly has that, So same thing like Dave said, Gerald Everett, you're attaching yourself to a great, quarterback. He's never going to see significant coverage because of the role that he plays in the team that he's on. So there are certainly things that matter. That's why I like Everett. I like Herb Smith. I was kind of hopeful for Evan Ingram, but he's having a miserable camp.
Yeah, me too.
So it's just a matter of, I think, what you're looking for and what's the most comfortable for you. But if you want discounted Pat Freiermuth and discounted Dawson Knox, you just take Hunter Henry and Robert Tonyan if he's healthy, and the production could be very similar. In Tunyan's case, it could be even better because we've already seen him do it once.
We've seen Henry do it too, though. Last year, he had like 9 touchdowns.
Yeah, he did. And actually, I feel like Jonnu Smith had a lot of targets near the end zone, but for some reason just didn't convert on them. So I was looking at some stats this morning.
Because he sucked.
Heath, Did you want to push back on any of this? I mean, again, the overarching thing is there's only been one tight end in the last 6 years who's finished top 5. This is a PPR stat, by the way, because catches obviously are. I'm sure it's different in non-PPR, but it's probably pretty close. Only one tight end in the last 6 years who's finished top 5 in PPR that hasn't been first or second on his team in targets. That was Robert Tonyan 2 years ago. And I know you can't push back on this. This is just a fact. In the last 4 seasons, half of the top 5 tight ends have been drafted in round 12 or later. So using those two things, it's trying to pick the guy who is going to be first or second on his team in targets with a late round pick might be kind of a breakout.
I think that's good. I just think it's probably true. Like Dalton Schultz tied with Amari Cooper, Logan Thomas tied with J.D. McKissick. I wouldn't close to second. Maybe I'd expand it to, can this guy be close to the number 2 wide receiver or close to the pass catching running back if that's the situation? It's a really weird situation to have a running back and a tight end second and thirds. Maybe that's a bad example. But I just wouldn't be too, then I would also acknowledge that, like, could he be second like Irv Smith? If something happens to Kirk Cousins, it's possible, or to Adam Thielen again, it's very possible Irv Smith could be second on the Vikings in targets. So is the guy an injury away from an older injury prone player from being second? Might be of value as well. But if I was looking at like the late round or not drafted tight ends and saying who could be second, I think whoever is the number 1 tight end in Jacksonville has to be towards the top of that list just because of the offense they're playing in.
Okay. You don't think they'll divvy it up too much between the two of them?
Well, they divvied it up in the past, and Zach Ertz was still leading his team in targets.
Okay. Let's take a break here, and when we come back, we will answer some tight end questions, overall strategy, which tier do you usually draft from, sleepers, breakouts, busts. After that, we'll talk about all these players. I think Travis Kelce, how about this for a stat? Travis Kelce had 34 or fewer yards in 4 of his last 5 regular season games. And then he averaged 100 yards per game in 3 playoff games. So is that a sign of things to come? Is he going to be a less consistent player at age 33? There's a lot to talk about with so many tight ends. We'll get into it right after this on Fantasy Football Today. All right, let's talk about strategy here. And let's start with Dave. What is your overall tight end strategy?
Number 1, I want to know what the ADPs are for each tight end. I already talked about that. Number 2, I want to know if I covet tight ends, do I want to not have to worry about finding a different tight end each week? Do I want to try and have a positional advantage by having a tight end? Am I going to specifically target one of those? Jamie mentioned it, the first 10 tight ends. I would probably shrink it to 8. Or maybe even 6, like one of those first top 6 tight ends. Am I targeting that to have a positional advantage over half my league and to give me fewer headaches when I go to set my lineup from week to week? Or am I okay with going to the waiver wire each week and streaming the tight end, playing waiver wire roulette, like we like to say, with tight ends? Once I have a good understanding of the ADP and a good understanding of what I want out of my tight end, I'm going to try and draft one simply at a fair value. I'm not going to try and steal one. If you try and wait on a tight end to get a steal, you're trying to get Pitts in round 5 or Kittle in round 6. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think you're going to have to draft a tight end at, okay, maybe it's a few spots ahead of his ADP. Maybe it's right at his ADP. It's a fair value. I want the position. I'm going to take it. That's basically the strategy.
Okay, but what do you usually see yourself doing? I mean, are you in the top 5 group? Are you in the?
I'm taking Kelce whenever I try to take Kelce, I should say, whenever I have a late first round pick. Okay. Whether it's taking him in round 1 and then taking the best available player in round 2, or there's a player I can't believe who's there in round 1, and I cross my fingers that Kelce makes it back to me past the turn. Andrews, I'm a little bit different on. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but usually if it's early round 3, I'm in. I want him. Pitts, late round 3, I'm in. Waller, maybe late round 4, but I prefer round 5. I'm in. Kittle's got to be late round 5 for me. Schultz is in that 6-7 range.
Amy, you're up. Overall strategy at tight end.
I just want to give you the results of the draft we did yesterday. It's half PPR draft. Adam, you're not in this draft, but the 3 of us were. And so Kelce went at the end of round 1 to Dan Schneier, pick 11. Keith with the second pick in round 2 took Mark Andrews. round 4, with the third pick of round 4, Kyle Pitts.
That was right in front of me. I really wanted Pitts.
Ooh, that's late for him.
Yeah.
And then the first 2 picks of round 5 were George Kittle and Darren Waller. So you kind of get a range of, to Dave's point about the ADP, you get a range of where they're going. Now, again, I think just based on ADP, Heath took Andrew sooner than we'll probably see him go. But obviously, Heath has a strong feeling about Andrew. So whenever you have a strong feeling about somebody, always try and make sure you get the guy you want. But I think these are kind of the ranges, late round 3, early round 4 for Pitts, round 5, early part of round 5 for those guys. Then you go all the way down to round 7. And with the third pick of round 7, I took Dalton Schultz.
Oh, well, that's how I wasn't in the draft, man, because there's no way he would have made it to you in round 7 if I were.
Yeah, so, you in full disclosure, I was helping the manager pick in front of me. So maybe that's where Schultz would have gone.
Drafting for him.
But in any event,
yeah.
So late round 6, early round 7, is the spot for Schultz?
Look, I think it's pretty simple, right? It's Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are in ADP. They're round 2 picks. Don't be surprised to see Kelce go in late round 1. And then Kyle Pitts is round 3. And then you have to decide, do I want in on 3, 4, 5? Do I want in on Pitts in round 3, Kittle round 4, Waller in round 4, and maybe they make it to the beginning of round 5? One of them might. And if you're not in the top 5, then you've got a clear tier according to ADP of Schultz, Hawkinson, Goddard. They're around 6 and 7 picks. And that's 8 tight ends. And if you're not there, Zach Ertz, and then a lot of guys who are not very proven. I don't think there's one proven player in that after that. Knox, Freiermuth, Gesicki. Gesicki is somewhat proven. Kmet, Hunter Henry, he's proven, but you know what I'm saying here. They're risky. And you have to decide where you want to be. So Heath, you take Mark Andrews a lot. I guess that's probably your first strategy is take him in round 2. Is that right?
It's pretty easy. I think it's Kelce or Andrews in the first 2 rounds. It's Goddard or Schultz in round 7, and it's 2 double-digit tight ends if I don't get any of those 4.
Okay, so you're out. You're just not willing to take Pitts, Kittle, or Waller until round 5, basically.
Right, and their ADPs. I mean, and I would take them in round 5 if they're there. It's happened once or twice, but their ADPs in the first 4 rounds. So assuming we're going by ADP. And really, I should just say the same thing with Schultz, but since Jamie got him in round 7, I wanted to include him. He's got an early round 6 ADP. It's pretty much just Kelce or Andrews or Goddard in round 7 or double digits, but guys can fall.
What about Hawkinson? You don't put him there with Goddard and Schultz?
I would, but he and Schultz are going early round 6, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, but do you basically feel that they're all the same?
I like Goddard a little more than Schultz and Hawkinson.
Okay.
You like Goddard more than Schultz? Wow.
Yeah.
So, how important is it to have a top 5 tight end?
Not quite as important as it is to have a top 2 tight end.
But more important than having a top 12 tight end.
Well, then let me follow up with this. I know how I feel about this. And you look at Pitts, Waller, and Kittle, and they're being drafted in rounds 3 through 4. And that's in a 12-team league, by the way. Are you more excited or nervous about them as a group? Pitts, Waller, Kittle. Are you more excited or nervous?
Nervous.
Excited about Pitts, nervous about the other 2.
So, and you said nervous, right, Heath?
I said just nervous all the way for all 3.
Is that not extremely telling, guys? That we basically said nervous, almost, not, Jamie specified, not for Pitts.
Right.
But, I mean, that if you don't get Pitts, then for Waller and Kittle in round 4, we feel nervous about that, Dave. I mean, that is a huge takeaway to me right there, and I think people should be listening to that. So let's expand.
I think it's baked into the ADP, unless you're taking them in early round 4. Is that where do they? Jamie just mentioned. I think he said early round 5.
First 2 picks of round 5.
Okay,
that's where they went.
I look at it like this.
Hold on, 45th for Waller, and a little earlier for Kittle.
I mean, we're talking 5 to 7 picks. The difference.
42nd for Kittle, 45th for Waller.
I don't know exactly who was available when they went off the board. I'd be surprised if they were picked ahead of someone who had fallen, someone with around 3 ADP or something like that, just an obvious steal. But I feel like when you draft those guys, you're almost paying for, based on ADP, them being tight ends. And you're hoping that Kittle continues on to be a top 4 tight end on a per game basis like he's been. You're hoping that Waller finds 9 touchdowns. His target share is going to drop with Devontae there. But you're hoping they can make up for it with touchdowns, and you're hoping that they can both still be better than Dalton Schultz. Unless you've got serious conviction in Schultz, that's who's going there. And there's reason to be nervous, but that's also why they're not going in round 3 closer to where Kyle Pitts is going.
Yeah, but is it baked enough? I don't know, man. Like, there's a lot of good players going in round 4, right? We talk about that run of wide receivers. You've got Pittman currently 41st, Waddle.
Well, here, I'll give you the draft just so you have it.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to use the CBS draft. I want to use ADP here. I know.
Why can't we talk about both? Because here we've got a real life example.
I mean,
let's just do it quickly.
You're talking about Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf. Right now, it's DJ Moore. He's not anywhere near that in our drafts. Travis Etienne, Elijah.
You want to reference the ADP, but then say it doesn't reflect our drafts.
Because what am I supposed to say? Like, Pittman and DJ Moore are in this range in Fantasy Pros.
Yes, but they're going to fly past these guys.
They should go ahead and
start drafting for real.
I think so, but I don't know that for sure. But the point is,
a really good question is whether our drafts are more representative of our listeners' leagues or ADP is.
Oh, it's ADP.
And I think our drafts currently are more representative than CBS ADP, but it's catching up because there haven't been as many non-dynasty drafts yet. But if you're looking at consensus draft across multiple sites, I think it's probably consensus ADP.
Adam, you should probably name a wide receiver or a running
Mike
back,
Williams.
and we'll tell you whether or not they should go ahead or behind of Waller and Kittle.
Mike Williams.
William.
I've got Waller ahead of Williams in PPR.
Brandon Cooks.
Ahead of the tight ends.
Come on.
He's in the 50s in ADP. Travis Etienne. So was Mike Williams for that matter. Travis Etienne.
Etienne.
He's another one who's sandwiched between Waller and Kittle for me.
Chris Godwin.
Ahead of them.
Godwin.
J.K. Dobbins.
Tight ends.
The tight ends.
All right. Okay, let's move on. Favorite sleeper tight end. Let's go Dave, Jamie, Heath. No. I took all the good ones away from Heath yesterday.
I don't know. Nobody's going to choose mine.
Might
so go
say
Dave, Jamie, Heath. Mine's last. Mine won't be chosen.
Dave, Jamie, Heath. Favorite sleeper.
For now, it's Njoku.
Okay. Jamie?
Irv Smith. We did this.
Yeah.
Heath?
I'm going to go with Tyler Higbee.
I remember this segment. All right. Favorite breakout tight end. JB, Heath, Dave.
Cole Kmet.
Ooh. That was a surprise. I thought he was going to say Kyle Pitts. I'll leave Kyle Pitts for Dave. Dallas Goedert.
Kyle Pitts. Yeah.
All right, bust. Heath, Dave, Jamie.
Dawson Knox.
Zach Ertz is a streaming tight end.
If Gesicki's a top 12 tight end, then Gesicki.
He is. He's 11th.
Yuck.
Those are okay. We got some interesting names here. Dallas Goedert as a breakout. I'm going to say this for Heath here. I don't know if you're going to get to this, but if you look at regular metrics, advanced metrics, and you compare Goddard to the 2 tight ends he's being drafted around, Hawkinson and Schultz, he crushes them. I mean, Hawkinson and Schultz have really bad advanced metrics. They barely make explosive plays. Goddard has a high ADOT and a high catch rate. He's just been statistically just exciting, very exciting. So I wanted to say that about Goddard. We also need to talk about Zach Ertz, Dave calling him a streamer. But let's talk about your breakout pick, Heath, Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, and I think if he'd have had a normal touchdown rate and they'd have been a normal offense in the second half of last year, then I wouldn't be able to say that because Dallas Goedert would have finished much higher. But obviously it was a weird situation last year, and then his ADP is being held down by the fact that A.J. Brown has joined the team. But I mostly subscribe to that theory that there are in offenses, there are tight end buckets and wide receiver buckets. And so I think A.J. Brown's going to hurt Jalen Reagor and Devonta Smith and Quez Watkins and whoever else more than he hurts Dallas Goedert. I would not be surprised at all if Dallas Goedert gets more targets than Devonta Smith and finishes second on the team in targets and top 5 at tight end.
I knew you were going to say the thing about the tight end buckets. And I think it's really interesting. I thought about it before the show. I mean, I come prepared for arguments with Heath now. I do my notes.
You know, you could think about the things that Dave and Jamie say often and come up with arguments against those instead of the things I say.
Okay, but those are easy to fight back against.
There are times where I think it's absolutely right. You know, the Eagles. Yeah. Was it Richard Rodgers? Remember the Richard Rodgers game, right? I think the Cowboys are going to be an example that you look at, right, where they just kind of evenly distribute their targets every year. But I also think there are some examples of the opposite, where a wide receiver gets hurt and a tight end step. Mike Gesicki is perfect, right? It's 2 years in a row.
Yes, and I think Gesicki's a good example because he played more wide receiver, and that's kind of what the training camp reports that have been negative for Gesicki have been, that they want him to play in line more. Whereas in the prior years, Mike Gesicki is, and he's even argued about it with his franchise tag, he's been a wide receiver who's being paid and called a tight end.
He's a slot. He's been in the slot. Yeah, right. But what I was going to say is his targets shot up two years in a row when Preston Williams got hurt.
Yep.
But okay. No, I think I was going to say there are good examples of what you're saying, that the buckets thing. Dave, Zach Ertz as a bust.
I think he's going to be fine to start the season as long as Hopkins wasn't there. Last year without Hopkins, he had a huge target share. It was over 20% in Arizona. And I think it'll be close to that even with Marquise Brown there. But when Hopkins comes back and if Brown's healthy, I'm worried about just how many targets he'll get. He might be a touchdown or bust type of tight end. Last year, remember Marquise Brown wasn't there last year. When Hopkins played, Zach Ertz's target share was 14%. So I think he's a supplemental part of the offense when they're healthy. When they're not healthy, he's a prominent part of the offense. He's going to be prominent for the first 6 weeks of the season. That makes him worth drafting, in my opinion, where his ADP is. But once you get to that midpoint of the season, Hopkins is back, Brown theoretically there. I don't know how good he'll be. I don't know if he'll get more than 4 targets a game.
Well,
he won't be the second most target getter in Arizona.
That's true. Oh, I mean, that's a good point. Zach Ertz was from week 7 on, when he first played for the Cardinals, he was second among tight ends in targets. He was tied with Travis Kelce, both of them way behind Mark Andrews. But and he also had a ton of red zone and green zone targets, and he just couldn't convert on them. I just want to give one more Dallas Goedert stat that might make Heath even more excited. Remember, I said Dawson Knox ran the most routes in goal-to-go situations. Well, Dallas Goedert actually played the most snaps in goal-to-go situations. He was not even close in routes. He was not even top 10. But if they throw the ball a little bit more, he's always on the field, it seems, in those situations. So most snaps in goal-to-go situations for Dallas Goedert, but very few routes, unfortunately. All right, let's see. ADP, get into it here. Let's do Kelce versus Andrews. Travis Kelce going 14th overall, and Mark Andrews going 22nd. Jamie, why do you have Travis Kelce ahead of Andrews?
I don't think we're going to see any sort of downturn for Kelce, and maybe we see an uptick in targets for Kelce. The thing that concerns me about Andrews is the numbers that he put up with Lamar Jackson and without Lamar Jackson. And I hope that's something that they realize should continue, is that they could make Lamar Jackson lean on Andrews more. And that probably makes a lot of sense when you lose Marquise Brown, even as good as Rashad Bateman can be. And we'll find out what the running game is going to look like, depending on the health of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and whatever they get from the rest of the guys that Greg Roman hates. But I think Mark Andrews has proven to be the second best tight end in fantasy, despite what he did last year. And until Travis Kelce completely falls off the map, I'm going to stick with Kelce over Andrews, and by the margin that he's going.
All right, Heath, you have Kelce 1, right? But you're
I do have Kelce 1. I've gone back and forth a couple of times this offseason, but yes, I currently have Kelce just ahead of Mark Andrews.
but you still are the one who's the highest on Andrews, and you take him all the time. And, talk about that. Are you concerned about those splits? Jamie just mentioned it, the numbers with and without Lamar Jackson. His 17-game pace with Lamar Jackson, I'll just give the targets. 136 targets. His 17-game pace without Lamar Jackson, 184 targets. He went from a 23% target share to a 29% target share.
It's simply this. He averaged 14.4 PPR points per game last year with Lamar, 22.3 PPR points per game without. 22.3 PPR points per game without Lamar Jackson.
All right, Heath, what's your reaction to that? Do you care?
It's a little bit of an Amon-Ra St. Brown thing where we're like, he can't be as good as he was in the second half of the year. So now he's definitely not going to be like, I agree with that. He's not going to get 184 targets for sure. 136 seems pretty reasonable to me. I wanted to look and see what I had him projected for. 137.
I was with them throwing a lot though. So that's where are you on that? Where are you on their offensive splits?
I have them at 500. I know over 500, 526 pass attempts. And I don't know what their pace was in the first half of the season because I know Huntley threw more than Lamar did. But 526 is really pretty close to in the middle of what they did 2 years ago and what they did last year.
Okay. I cut you off, so I'm sorry. Keep going. Talk about Mark Andrews.
No, I think part of why I have Andrews higher is because I'm not as certain about Pitts as a round 3 pick. So I see a pretty big gap between those top two and everyone else, which means I see a pretty big edge in having Mark Andrews. I don't know, like I've got him projected for 93 catches, 1,180 yards, and 9 or 10 touchdowns. I don't know that that's too outlandish or that far removed from what everybody else would expect. I think I just have a bigger gap from Andrews to everyone else. I've got Kelsey 14 points ahead of Andrews, 43 points ahead of tight end 3.
Gotcha. And Lamar Jackson, by the way, was on pace for 584 pass attempts in his 11 healthy starts, taking about the 4 pass attempts he threw against Cleveland. So 584 for him. They were throwing so much last year.
And he may start off on that pace again if Dobbins isn't ready.
See, that's the point that I really wanted to make because I've kind of poo-pooed Andrews all off season. Like before the off season or before training camp, I'd say there's no way the Ravens are going to be a pass heavy team. Well, if Dobbins isn't ready to go, or if Dobbins isn't right when he is ready to go, how effective can their running backs be? And if that's the case, that means they're definitely going to throw more. They won't be dead last in the league in pass attempts per game. They're going to start throwing a little bit more. That helps Andrews. And I mentioned Andrews average 14.4 PPR points per game. What the hell? You wouldn't take that from your tight end if it wasn't Travis Kelce? That's 1.4 PPR points per game worse than Kelce was last year. So if this running back conundrum continues in Baltimore, I think that raises Andrews' profile quite a bit. And then what Heath is doing is making a lot of sense.
I'm going to fire a few quick questions at you. Would you guys take Stephon Diggs or Travis Kelce?
Kelce.
DeAndre Swift or Kelce?
Kelce.
I'm going to say Kelce.
Jamar Chase or Kelce?
Chase.
I think I'm taking Kelce.
Ooh, okay. How about Mark Andrews or CeeDee Lamb?
Andrews.
Lamb.
Mark Andrews or Leonard Fournette?
Andrews.
Leonard.
This is a fun game.
Yeah.
I will say Andrews. Everybody else say whatever name Adams.
Can we find a player that Heath will say over Andrews?
How about
there's 11 of them.
Wow, you have him 12.
How about Devontae Adams or Devontae Adams or a tight end?
Kelce, Adams, Andrews.
Both tight ends, then Andrews, then Adams.
Okay. That's just because his last name says Adam in it, I think. For Heath. So anyway, Jamie, I know you got to go soon. Let me ask you this, Jamie, and we'll let you run. You could easily be late in the first round, have the 10th pick, 11th, 12th, whatever, and your decision is, do I take Kelce in round 1 or Pitts in round 3? That's what ADP suggests. You're not guaranteed either of them to be there. Kelce is going 14th. Pitts is going 35th. So basically the very end of round 3. What do you think is a better strategy? And I'll tell you some of the running backs you might be able to get late in round 3. You might be able to get David Montgomery. Cam Akers is 36th. Antonio Gibson Jacobs, Dobbins, it's not great, but the wide receivers are maybe a little bit better. Pittman is there, Deontay, Jalen Waddle. So what do you think is a better strategy if you have a late pick? Kelce in round 1 or Pitts in round 3?
The only way I would pass on Kelce there, and it wouldn't be with the hope of getting Kyle Pitts, it would just be passing on Kelce, would be if there's 2 or 3 players that I have ranked ahead of him that have already, that other players have gone in front of those guys. So, like, we've seen some drafts where Devontae Adams is the 3rd receiver taken, which puts Chase down, or even in some cases Jefferson down. Or there's, this is probably maybe a little earlier in the process, but where Alvin Kamara goes in the 1st round and pushes, one of those receivers down, or a different running back down. So that's really the only situation where I would probably pass on Kelce. But if I'm picking as early as 10, 11, 12, I'm probably taking Kelce.
And that highlights another point, like just looking at ADP, for me at least, and I don't think it's true for these guys with Pitts, but his ADP is 34th. If I pass on Andrews early in round 2, there is not another tight end based on ADP that I can draft until Dallas Goedert. Like every other tight end, the next 6 are going before I have them ranked.
I'm just going to say that, just to have this debate. I mean, I have no problem with Dalton Schultz in round 6. He was the 3rd best tight end last year per game. I think he was 5th or 6th. But
his current ADP is 59th.
Oh, is it? I thought he was around 6 pick. Okay. He's got the 59th highest ADP, but his ADP is 65th. It's a pretty big difference. Between round 5 and round 6.
You can't count on getting him in round 6.
Now, I'm not taking him in round 5. I'm willing to. I think it's even a bit of a reach in round 6, because he isn't a great football player so far from what we've seen.
But he's in such a great situation.
He's in a great situation.
I mean, they lose 165 targets from just Cooper and Wilson alone, and then now you have 2 of the 3 guys that they were hoping to replace those guys maybe out for the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm willing in round 6, guys. I'm not willing to take Dalton Schultz in round 5. Is that how I know?
Well, look, again, it's like how Heath drafts Andrews. If there's somebody that you want and you're looking at the board at that point, like, why would you not take him? Oh, I'm not going to take him because it's 5 picks too soon. Like, that's just stupid.
Right.
Well, there are a lot of good players in that range, but
that's a different story. But I mean, if that's the guy you really covet, especially if you don't want to dip your toe into the Goddard, Hawkinson, Ertz pool, or Kmet, and then certainly the guys after that, why would you not take the guy that you want?
Yeah, no, Jamie's exactly like, if you're at the 5-6 turn, you don't get a shot at Hawkinson or Goddard. They're going to be gone before you pick again. So you're just deciding, do I want to stream tight end, or do I want to take Dalton Schultz here?
All right, so if I'm at
pick 5, it's like pick 5.8 or 5.9. I think that's where the concern comes in. Where you're not right at the turn, but you're closer to it.
Right.
So yeah, if I'm at the 5-6 turn, that means I have a late pick, right? It's the end of round 5,
right?
Uh-huh.
And the situation for you is that two of the 3 managers after you have already taken a tight end, and you just risk.
Yeah, so you got to look at the roster. You always got to look at the roster grid there.
All right, I gotta go. See you guys.
All right,
later, Jim.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about.
Gotta go. Bye.
Throwback. I want to talk a little bit more about Kyle Pitts. Seems like Dave is higher on Kyle Pitts than Heath is. Last year, 1,026 yards, most ever for a rookie tight end. He did do that in 17 games. They didn't throw the ball that much down the stretch, and he didn't have all that many targets, but he finished pretty strong. The offense is obviously concerning. But Dave, make the case for Kyle Pitts and why you're okay with him in round 3.
I'm okay with him in round 3 because I think he's got a chance to. Let me see if I really want to say this.
I'll say
okay, I don't really want to say this, so I'm going to say it like this. I think he's got the chance to be the tight end with the 2nd most targets in the National Football League this year. I think he's going to obviously lead Atlanta in targets as long as he stays healthy. And I feel like the blueprint for what Arthur Smith wants from his offense has been laid out. He's got all these big dudes. And so I'll take the big dude. The big dudes tell me that they've got a quarterback who isn't pinpoint accurate. All he has to do is throw it up and let the guy make a catch. It's literally what Desmond Ridder did every time he threw in Alec Pierce's direction at Cincinnati. So if we're going to bet on a big dude in this offense, why not bet on the big dude who's the most explosive, who's got a year of experience, and who may not see double coverage as much as he did last year because there's other big dudes in the Atlanta offense. I also think Atlanta's a team that's going to have to throw more than they want to. I think they're going to trail a lot. I don't think their defense is particularly great. Meanwhile, their defense has been dominating their training camp because their offense hasn't been so great. But Pitts has been good. And I like the numbers that he had last year without Calvin Ridley on the field. His explosive rate was higher. His yards per route run was higher. His target rate was higher. His catch rate was 1% lower. But he got more targets per game. Makes sense. I think that he's going to be in a position where he can utilize his explosiveness. He'll be a top target in the red zone, whereas he wasn't last year. And he'll come through with, probably higher numbers than he had last year in terms of catches and yards and more touchdowns, because how do you only have one touchdown? He's going to get more. It might be 5. But I think he comes through and finishes as his top 3 tight end. I'm willing to bank on that. And if I'm wrong on the tight ends and he actually goes up, then he's got a chance to be number 1.
Okay, Heath, why are you not taking Pitts until round 5?
If you give Kyle Pitts a 4.3% touchdown rate last year, and I didn't just arbitrarily choose that. That's Marcus Mariota's career touchdown rate. And you would not expect a rookie quarterback to be any better than that. Then he would have scored 4.7 touchdowns. Let's call it 5. So you give him 24 more fantasy points for the year. He would have been tight end 8. He would have been behind
same
TJ
number
Hawkinson.
of yards.
What's that?
Same number of yards and catches, but with
Just
5
give
tight
him
ends.
a normal touchdown rate.
All right, so all you're doing is adding 4 touchdowns the way we did last year. It's 24
Right.
fantasy
I'm just
points.
saying that the touchdowns were not the difference between Kyle Pitts deserving his ADP last year and not. Had he scored a normal amount of touchdowns for Marcus Mariota's career, he still would have been tight end 8 behind Hawkinson, behind Schultz, behind 7 other tight ends. I am not convinced that the Falcons with Mariota or Ritter, 2 very much more mobile quarterbacks than Matt Ryan, are going to have more pass attempts. They might have more dropbacks, but when those guys get in trouble, they're going to take off and run. So I'm not certain that the pass volume is going to go up. I think the quality of his targets are going to go down. And I don't think the touchdown regression is enough to get him into the really to be certain that he's a top 5 tight end.
I think people are just hoping. They have a blind faith, right? Sometimes you have blind faith.
I should have started with this. Kyle Pitts is an incredible athlete. I'm very excited for him. He's my number 1 tight end. And if he busts again this year and finishes tight end 8, he'll still be my number 1 tight end in Dynasty. I can't wait to see him get with a good quarterback and maybe a different offensive coaching staff. But for now, the situation is just too concerning for me. And I could probably get on board if it was round 4. But man, 2 rounds ahead of Kittle and Waller, who were
it's not 2 rounds. It's like a round.
Okay, because I've got him in round 5, but they're actually going in round 4 according to ADP. So
Yeah. And I think he's only about just technically speaking. I mean, this is actually pretty important, right? Pitts ADP is 35th, Kittle is 42nd, and Waller is 45th. So they're all within 10 picks of each other.
Okay. I was thinking more about our drafts, but yes.
Yeah.
Pitts was number 6 in just raw fantasy points scored among tight ends last year.
Yeah, he was 12th per game because the touchdowns.
Because the touchdowns really hurt him, but he still scored the 6th most over the balance.
But he would have been
of the
8th per
season.
game if the touchdowns had been a little more normal.
Okay, yeah, I've basically come to the point where if you told me Mariota was going to start 17 games, I'd be fine with Pitts 35th overall. But Ritter scares the hell out of me. This wasn't even.
He's going to play for sure this year.
Yeah, I know.
100%.
Bad quarterback class, and I don't want any of these guys in there. So unless they're surprisingly good, Ritter scares me for Pitts.
Can I give you one other reason why I think Pitts is getting pushed up? I think there's trepidation, and I think we kind of proved this when you asked us about whether or not we were nervous about tight ends 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
There's trepidation about Waller being what we're used to seeing from Waller. There's trepidation about Kittle being what we're used to seeing from Kittle.
Man.
And I think for me, that's what pushes up Pitts a little bit too, is that I'd rather take the chance with Pitts where there's clear upside and he should be the number one target on his team, then wait around and worry about the risk of downside with Waller and Kittle.
You could avoid all of this by just taking Mark Andrews in round 2.
That's definitely true. Or Kelsey in round 1. Yeah. Or Dalton Schultz in round 6, 7.
Well, yeah.
Dallas Goedert. He makes an interesting
all the players.
For Goddard.
It's been such a good offseason for Kelsey and Andrews. Not only did their teams trade away the number one wide receiver on the team, but Kyle Pitts' situation got worse. Darren Waller's situation got worse. George Kittle's situation got worse. Dallas Goedert's situation, unless they throw the ball a lot, got worse. They added A.J. Brown. T.J. Hawkinson, I don't know. I mean, they drafted Jameson Williams. We don't know when he'll be there, but Amon-Ra St. Brown has emerged. Hasn't gotten better. Schultz has gotten better. His situation has gotten better. Zach Ertz's situation has gotten worse. So that's definitely something you need to consider when you're looking at one of those two tight ends, those first two tight ends in round 2, according to ADP. And it's such a shame with Kittle and Waller because these guys are such tremendous players, and maybe they can overcome it. Dave mentioned it earlier. George Kittle's been a top 4 tight end in non-PPR and a top 3 tight end in PPR on a per-game basis 4 straight seasons. Heath, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say that I may need to look at Kittle and Waller a little more just because of the tight end buckets argument. But with Kittle, it's more of a concern about Trey Lance than it is about competition for targets.
We need to talk about this. I'm glad you brought this up.
Well, we are an hour and 2 minutes in, so
this is worth it. This is worth it.
But I do want to get to a lot of other players, so go ahead on. Yeah, Kittle with Trey Lance. He only played 1 game with Trey Lance starting last year, and Kittle had 2 targets, 1 catch on 23 pass attempts.
I got something better than that.
Yeah, it's discouraging, right?
It is. They played 99 snaps together. Kittle was targeted he had a 9.1 target per route run rate. He had 4 targets on 99 snaps. Now this includes running plays. He's not going to get targeted on a running play, but only 4 targets, 1 end zone target, 1 catch for 29 yards. And there have been reports that Kittle might be asked to block more. There's been some concerns about how the offensive line is going to be in San Francisco. So that could be problematic for Kittle. And when Lance played any snap last year, the 49ers threw the ball 45% of the time. And there was a report that just came out today that there's still a little bit of trepidation in Trey Lance as a passer in San Francisco. He's had an up and down camp. We've talked about this.
Yeah.
These are the things that make me want to put Dalton Schultz ahead of George Kittle in my rankings. I did it before this offseason, and I changed it back because of Kittle's track record, because he's just found a way to be top 4 in points per game. But you think about Lance as a detriment. You think about how Brandon Ayuk has started to step up in camp. Debo's going to be there. I think I might make the switch again and move Kittle down and move Dalton Schultz up, because I don't think I want Kittle on my fantasy team. It could blow up in my face, but the more that I'm just talking about it now makes me realize that it makes me realize that I don't think I want to spend a round 5 pick on Kittle anymore. And if I'm in round 6, I might take Schultz. I think the target per route run rate will be better. I think he'll get more catches. He might be the better bet to stay healthy for 17 games too.
Yeah. All right, let's let Heath get in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I felt a little inconsistent with the tight end bucket thing, with the Pitts, Waller, Kittle thing, but I don't know that you can rank Dalton Schultz ahead of George Kittle and then say we're just going to ignore the numbers with Kyle Pitts because he's so good. Like, the difference between Kittle and Schultz talent-wise is a mountainous gulf.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know about a mountainous gulf.
No, it's a mountainous gulf. I think
it's no mountainous gulf.
What is a mountainous
that's
gulf?
Moronic, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Golf.
It's a gulf that is so large that it has mountains in it, and it's still a gulf. It's still a gulf with mountains in it.
Let me hit on a few other subjects here. Does anybody feel any excitement at all about TJ Hawkinson this year?
No.
Mild.
Yeah. And
when I draft him, it's usually when I draft Hawkinson, I'm usually doing it where I feel like it's kind of a bargain. And I think the fact that the Lions added some deep speed can help Hawkinson, especially when you consider that Jared Goff does seem shy about throwing downfield. Now defenses have to respect the speed of DJ Chark, and when he's healthy, Jameson Williams. That should open up things underneath for Hawkinson and St. Brown and DeAndre Swift. I think he's going to be more of a touchdown needy tight end than I'd like to admit. But I also think he can get in that 5-6 target per game area. Yeah, I don't mind him at his ADP.
That's round 6. That's before Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, I take it
late-
back. If
late
his
round
ADP is
7
round
for
6,
Hawkinson for me.
You should be
I take that
excited
back.
by your round 6 pick, right?
Yeah,
All
I'd
right, so
rather I'm in round 7, 8.
Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts, Kittle, Waller, Schultz round 6, Hawkinson round 6, Goddard round 7, Ertz round 8, Knox round 8. Way too early, right?
Way too early.
Way too early. Yes.
Pat Fryermuth round 10, Mike Gesicki round 10. Thoughts there?
Nope.
I'm waiting.
Nope.
Cole Kmet, Hunter Henry, Irv Smith.
Komet.
I like Komet, and we're in round 11 now, right?
I think round 12 or 13, actually.
Yeah, Komet and Irv Smith. That's a dynamic duo of unproven tight ends.
Kmet has done like almost nothing. Right? Is there any number that looks good for Cole Kmet other than his targets?
I think he had more yards than Pat Fryermuth last year.
He had a lot more targets, didn't he? Actually, I don't know about that. But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Cole Kmet does not have a good statistical profile.
I don't know that that's necessarily true.
Okay, go ahead.
He's a second-year tight end who had 612 yards as a 22-year-old. Or a third. I mean, he's a second-round pick, former second-round pick who had 600 yards as a 22-year-old. I don't think that's bad for a tight end. I think most,
per target, per route, that kind of stuff. He's pretty bad.
He has not been efficient yet at all. I would agree with that. I'm just saying most young tight ends are bad.
Sure. Noah Fant, David Njoku, Alberto.
I have not drafted any of them once all year, and I've got to go.
I've drafted Njoku in our pick-by-pick series where we draft 15 rounds of players. I will find ways to find a second tight end onto my bench late in drafts. For now, Njoku is that tight end. Evan Ingram was that tight end at one point, and then I got skeeved out over all the camp reports. I had someone who's an observer of Jaguars camp tell me, I said to him, he's had 3 drops through like 5 days of camp, right? And he goes, more. And so, like, when Jamar Chase was dropping passes, I really wasn't worried because I knew how good of a player he was in college. And I figured there's no way he's going to keep that up in the pros and have a high drop rate. I've seen Evan Ingram screw up enough times to be wary of drafting him. I'd rather miss out on him than tell people to take him in round 14.
And Alberto, it's not really clear that he's well ahead of Greg Dulcich or anything.
He's not.
So, yeah.
He's not. And I loved Dulcich coming out. He reminded me of Kittle when he was playing at UCLA. But we've seen the track record of rookie tight ends. Maybe Pitts and Fryermuth made some inroads on that to say that, yes, rookie tight ends can contribute. But I think Dulcich is one you pass on draft day. And if he ends up having a significant role early on, then you grab him. That'll change if he's clearly taking on playing time with the ones. He takes over as the main guy. He's making great plays.
All right.
He has awesome hair, by the way. Awesome.
I'm sorry, Dave. You need to go because
you don't want to hear about Greg Dulcich's
I do not.
hair.
What
about his mustache?
Robert Tonyan averaged 5 targets per game in 3 games without Devontae Adams. And that's actually significant because when Robert Tonyan has gotten 5 targets, he has usually come through with a big game. We hope he's healthy for week 1. But it's Tonyan, Evan Ingram, Gerald Everett, Tyler Higbee, Hayden Hurst, Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas has been top 8 per game 2 straight years. That's if you remove the game where he played 4 snaps. Austin Hooper, Cameron Brate. Any interesting names there?
Hooper's interesting, but he might not be any better than the number 3 target getter in an offense that doesn't love to throw the football.
Over the last 3 years in Tennessee, that's where Hooper is now. Tight ends have got 32% of their touchdowns. So he could be a good streaming option to catch a touchdown.
Who do they play early on?
Tyler Higbee, I don't understand why he's so low. He finished very strong, including in the playoffs before he hurt his knee and couldn't play in this. Did he play in the Super Bowl? I forget. He and Uzama both hurt their knee. One of them didn't.
He did. I don't think he did because it was Kendall Blanton.
Yeah, right. So
that ended up having a pretty good role. And he apparently has had a very nice camp or off season or whatever. Titans start off against the Giants, then the Bills, then the Raiders, then the Colts. That's not so bad. Maybe there's something there.
Week 1 is great. Yeah, week 1 is great. Bills are very good against tight ends, though.
If they're healthy.
They'll be healthy. Come on. We've got a month before the season starts. They're going to be healthy. All right. That's it for today's show.
We got a month still?
More than that.
We got a month more of preseason games before the season? Oh, shit. Ships.
Wow, that was weird, Dave. All right, we're out of here. I don't know why Dave is wearing what he's wearing. Yes, Mike Evans left with an injury. We'll talk about it on the mailbag show that you're going to hear on Saturday. Thank you so much, everybody. Later.